What's up, everyone? How's it going? I hope you're all doing great and following the 3 H's of the channel. In this video, it's all about the European country of Austria. If that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump with me, and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. So I'm from Austria, and this happened years and years ago, way back when I was 10 years old. I was in a big school that was founded by a really rich guy who donated a lot of money in the early 19th century. His crypt is in the basement of an elementary school. Now, if that isn't spooky, I don't know anymore. So, once a year, all the kids go down there to look at the crypt and learn a bit about the guy, who, all jokes aside, was a really great person, basically a saint, I'll tell you that much. So we went down there. To get there, you have to go down a big circular staircase that divides the elementary from a special school. I'm not sure what the English word for it is, but basically it's where kids with some very mild special needs go to. So, I see a kid picking up some old newspapers from the ground behind a big glass door. This is really odd since they have classes right now. And by the way, what does the kid do with garbage anyways? I feel odd because he had a weird look to him. He was dressed weird, not like all the other 90s kids with Pokemon shirts and jean shorts, but more like a sort of coat and a grown man haircut. I tell my friend, but he doesn't really seem to care. We walk down and go around the corner where all the workshops were, and we eventually get to this big, giant iron door that just looks scary looking at. The teacher was looking for the key. While we're waiting for a few seconds, I turn and look back to the corner that we just came around. There's a woman standing there. She's about 20 meters away from us, up this little staircase. Her eyes are closed, or at least I think they were. She's baring her teeth. They're all foul and black. I kid you not, she stands there and looks like she's straight from hell. She has that weird shine around her, like she's glowing or something. She says the name of our teacher, and then falls down and crab walks behind the wall again. Me and my friend start crying because we never felt so horrified in our young lives. Only me, my friend T, and the teacher saw her. The rest of the class is confused by us suddenly to start crying in agony. The teacher was like, well, that was effing weird, and then seems to get angry at myself and my friend, telling us both to calm down, that she wasn't there, to forget about it. That's what she said to us. She was not there, forget about it. Only to me and my friend. The other kids didn't see. But it was the scariest thing in my entire life. The rest of the crypt visit was just like a crypt visit is for a kid, quite boring. I recently talked with my friend about this, and he remembers it just as real as I do. He said that he also thought that it was just something that maybe we made up in our kid brain kind of state, but I have no idea what that was. What's even creepier is that the lady that we saw that looked like our teacher had no eyes, or had her eyes closed, either one. A few years later, the teacher went blind. I have been meaning to go back and visit her, but she died before I could. And to be honest, I was too scared to go back and meet her, wondering if she looked like the other woman that we saw on the stairs. I don't really care if you believe me or not. I just want to get things off of my chest. I'm from Austria, more specifically the Alps, and I think the village that I live in is cursed or haunted or whatever. For clarification, there's a run-down, abandoned old farmhouse which was built in the early 17th century. It's said to be haunted. Some really bad people did all kinds of bad things there, satanic rituals and all that. But they got busted by the police for trespassing. They found drugs and blood everywhere, and a cow head. The odd thing about this place is, Since 1648, nobody has lived longer than 3 years in that house. The last person to inherit it was one of 8 children, which nobody wanted. It is abandoned since the 40s, and I got 4 stories to back that up. Story 1. I was a very young kid. I had ADHD. I was lying in my room. It was 3 a.m., and I was throwing the blanket over my head and pulling it down again because I literally had nothing better to do. I do this about 10 times or so. Suddenly, when I pull the blanket off again, I see this thing in my room. It looks like a Krampus, Austrian folklore, just standing there, looking down at me with those horrible eyes. I throw the blanket over my head again and start crying. I feel that that thing was still standing there. I stayed like this until the first sunbeams entered my room, when it finally left. Story 2. I was 13. I was laying in my room watching the Resident Evil Revelations 2 trailer. I was all hyped up. The only thing illuminating my room is my phone. And suddenly, a bony, dead-looking hand reaches under my phone from the darkness. It does this suggestion with its finger like I should come over. I throw my phone across the room. I start crying because I remembered the Krampus thing from when I was a kid. I turn on the lights. There's nothing there. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. Story 3. I was 19 years old this time. It's lockdown, so there's nothing better to do than go up to the forest near the abandoned farmhouse to get hammered. Every time we go there was a deer, stag, and foxes and whatnot. One night, when we got up there, the deer just blazed off from the forest like there's a predator up there. For clarification, in my region, we don't have any wolves, and a bear just passing through maybe every couple of years, if that. We are weirded out by this, but I don't think much of it. For a week straight, we hear exactly at 3:23 a.m. loud barking from the woods, or at least it sounds like barking to me. I know this because I check the time every time it happens. Sometimes I can hear tapping on my car. On day 8, me and my best friend say, screw it, let's get up there and check out what's barking. So we go into the forest with flashlights and a blank gun. We roam around for about 20 minutes and didn't find anything. Decided to go back. Then we saw what I can only describe as 2 glowing eyes in the dark, about 2 meters high in the bushes. Our flashlight was not very good. We couldn't see exactly what it was standing in there. We moved slowly forward, and then it just bolted away with the heaviest stomps I've ever heard, faster than any deer could have ever been. We turn around and just say, we're not following that, and run straight to the road. We didn't go up there again for about 2 years, which brings me to my final one, 2022. We go up there again. We went to the local dam in those woods. The place is actually pretty chill. There's this little lake, stones to sit on, and you aren't bothered by anyone. We sip a few beers, make a fire. We're having a pretty good time. Eventually, we decide to leave. My friend and I went to a little creek, which was flowing directly into that tiny lake. I grab onto my friend's hand so he can reach into the water to get the rest of the beers out. Suddenly, we hear the most deafening screech that we've ever heard in our entire lives. It came directly in front of us. I nearly dropped my friend into the creek. Myself, my friend, and the other people that I was up there with just looked into each other's eyes and said, yep, it's time to leave. We took our stuff, left the beers, and bolted through the forest back down to our car, all while hearing that awful screeching behind us with loud footprints. We finally decided then to not go up there anymore, and we haven't been there since. So I'm Austrian, and I've lived there my entire life, and I love hunting. The other year, I planned a hunting trip to an unspecified location in the Austrian Alps. I packed everything up and jumped into my car. My rifle is an old Steyr M95. This is relevant later. I have a prime hunting location. It's a steep rock face overlooking a clearing in a valley. This is between two nice-looking mountains. There are a few small cracks in the stone at the bottom. After the first day, I build up my tent, make a campfire, and drink a beer, and I drift off to sleep. Sometime in around midnight, I get awoken by an indescribable stench. It smelled like a dead animal was pressed out, and then its juices were sprayed across my camp. Since I'm quite paranoid from all these stories that I had read on the internet at the time, I take out my rifle. Then I hear some noises in the bushes. The bush is rustling, so I stabbed into it with my bayonet. I see a snake tail that disappears into one of the larger cracks that leads to a cave at the bottom. Relieved, I go back. I think, the snake must have just killed something, maybe a mouse. I tried to rationalize. I wasn't even back to sleep for an hour before a loud whistling sound tore me from my sleep. I took the rifle and again stormed out of my camp. My jaw dropped as I saw some creature. It looked like a snake with two legs in front of its body, and a head looking like a mixture between a cat and a lizard. I tried to chamber a round, but it doesn't work. Since the gun is so old, almost none of the caliber that it is chambered in is available, so I manually put handmade rounds into old casings. One of them seemed to have been deformed. I fumbled with my rifle while the creature released another sound. I finally get another round in the chamber. The creature lunged at me as I fire. I missed it, and it hit me. The creature was about 1.5 meters long, or 5 feet, and was surprisingly strong. It wrestled me to the ground, and I dropped the rifle. It bit my arm with its viper-like fangs. Thankfully, I wore a thick coat. It couldn't penetrate to my skin. I realized that the stench was emanating from the creature. I almost passed out from this disgusting smell. The creature was screeching loudly as it grabbed onto my arm and prepared to bite again. With my other arm, I got a hold of the bayonet that had dislodged from the barrel as the gun fell. I slashed at it. The creature screamed loudly and then escaped back into the cave. The blood stank even worse than the creature. I took the rifle and fired the entire clip into the hole, then took everything and hauled ass back to my car. I have no idea what this was. There is no animal that's comparable to this. To start off, my English will not be perfect. It's not my first language, but I did take a course all throughout university. So, I'm here to contribute a story that happened to me, an experience that happened in Austria when I was 19. It was 2009, and I was at my first year of university. I was taking economics in Holland. Exams are before Christmas, and resits are early January, so we have 3 weeks before lectures start again in February. Me and a group of 7 plan a skiing trip to Austria. 4 of us can ski well, the other 4 can't at all, so it's a good group. So fast forward to, I think, day 4 of the ski trip. That's when everything happened. All week, I have been basically locked in a battle of who has the biggest balls, with the other 3 guys who can ski, racing and doing stupid jumps. We were sat in a restaurant at lunch, and my Russian friend suggests that today we go to the top and ski down in the dark. The gut reaction was obviously not to do this. I've heard stories about idiots doing this before, breaking a leg, and dying out there, but my manhood requires me to accept the challenge, so we agree to it. I spend the rest of the day skiing and take one of the last chairlifts up to the highest point in the resort. We were worried that a lift worker would tell us to leave or rage at us for being up there, so we end up skiing down perhaps a few hundred meters, then take off our skis and walk off the track out of sight. We don't have to wait long. It gets dark around 5:30, so we just sit around talking and sipping from the 2 hip flasks that we have with us. I should mention at this point that it has been snowing lightly all day, but in the last half hour it's really picked up and it's now snowing fairly heavily. I start expressing my doubt when I realize just how dark it's going to be. Snow clouds are stopping any more light in, and the last of the day is disappearing down the valley. I get told to man up by the Italian guy, and I decide that I don't want to be the chicken of the group, so I stop talking. By the time it's properly dark, it gets really dark, and the torches we have don't really work well as we want them to because the light is reflecting off the fallen snow, so we can't see anything. I'm panicking a bit at this point because I scare pretty easily anyways, and I don't think the other guys are feeling great about this either, despite us all being a little drunk. Alcohol hits you so much different and harder at high altitude. We decide not to screw around like we have been doing all week and just go down slowly and safely as a group. I'm the only one without a head torch, so I plan to stick to them like glue. We set off slowly, and I'm sticking about a meter behind the Russian guy. We pick up speed though, despite there being a lot of powder on the slope, and I'm getting into a nice rhythm when one of my boot bindings pops out for no reason, and I go down. I swear and say, "Wait up, guys," but my Russian friend doesn't hear me from 10 meters ahead of me, and the other 2 are further up ahead than that. I start swearing to myself. I go crawling back up to find my ski while looking back down the slope as the lights of my friends are disappearing quickly. By the time I get my ski on, I can't see any of their lights anymore. I'm on the verge of crying, knowing that I'm a few kilometers from the village and I literally cannot see a thing. After a few moments, I get my nerves under control and focus myself on going very slowly and carefully. My friends must have noticed that I wasn't with them fairly quickly and are probably waiting for me further down. I'm also reassured by the fact that I'm on a straight and narrowest track that winds down the mountain amongst the trees. It makes it much easier to follow without going on to another track and getting lost and ending up God knows where. I've been going for maybe a few minutes when I smash right into a tree. I wasn't going fast enough to do damage, but my ski has come off again. The binding must have been loose once again. The gradient is pretty steep, and I can't find my ski when I stumble about with my phone screen shining, and I assume it must have gone down the hill a little ways. I take my other ski off and loosen my boot bindings so I can walk, and then I set off down the slope, carrying my ski, panning the ground slowly, looking for a hint of reflected light from my other ski. Of course, I get completely lost in the dark, and after 5 minutes of stumbling around, I really have no idea where I am, and I begin to panic again. And then suddenly I hear a noise. It's a ripping sound, like someone is tearing canvas or something. It was already pretty spooky with the howling wind and the snow, but I had no idea how to explain that noise. I have no idea what direction the sound's even coming from, as I'm super disoriented. It's like stumbling around your bedroom or house when it's pitch black. It lasts for maybe 30 seconds, and then it stops. I'm freaking out at this point, and I'm actually laying on the ground, trying to pretend that I'm not there, as it's pitch black. I decide eventually I have to move, so I stand up and start clomping in a random direction. At this point, I thought I was going to die out there that night, if not from the fact I was totally lost, then from the paranoid thoughts that I was having from watching too many horror movies. I only moved about 5 meters, and I literally stumbled over a shitload of blood and guts. I've never hunted before or anything, and I'm not used to this, and when I realize my hand is planted in a load of warm, gooey stuff, I stumble back and I actually vomit onto the snow. I sit there for a moment before I piece together in my head that the ripping sound was the sound of this thing's skin being torn open. My body goes into a blind panic at this point, and my memory order of what happens next isn't great. I think because I was hyperventilating and basically shitting my pants out of fear. I realized that whatever killed it was probably only meters away from me through the dark. Logic should have told me that if I couldn't see it, maybe it's not able to see me either, but of course, I wasn't listening to logic, and I just ran instead. Now I don't know how many of you guys have skied before, but running through the powder in ski boots is difficult enough without it being dark, and there's trees everywhere. I didn't get very far before I tripped on something, and I fell down over a ledge, maybe 2 meters high. It didn't hurt much, but I was lying there for a second, winded, when I heard a trickling of water next to me. I think something was peeing right next to me. I have no idea what it was, but it smelled horrid, and I could feel its heat. I got up and started running again in just a dead sprint, and I heard a horribly deep snarl behind me and heavy footfalls moving much faster than I was. And suddenly I catch sight of something, a bright light, 30 meters away through the trees. I start running toward it. I've never ran so fast in my life, despite the boots weighing me down. I burst out onto the track again, and there's a snowcat right in front of me, with all its lights on, blinding me. As I turned around to see what was chasing me, I caught a glimpse of something absolutely massive, with light gray fur, on all fours, fleeing the light's glare. A guy gets out of the snowcat and starts shouting at me in Austrian for a moment, before I guess realizing what state I was in and beckoning me to come over. I got in the snowcat with him. He drove me back down to the village. Turns out my friends had gone into a bar and asked them to call mountain rescue as I had been gone almost an hour. But the guy who found me was just out doing his job, bashing the track. So I told my friends what happened. They didn't believe me and thought that I just must have been really drunk. Still, they were happy to see me. If I hadn't have come across the snowcat, I would have frozen to death in the night, despite the fact that I had bloodstains on my hand and my face was a mess of snot and tears. I wrote down what happened as best I could when I got back, but I haven't talked about it to really anyone since, partly out of embarrassment after my friends didn't believe me. I did some research about the wildlife the next day, and I read that there are no wolves there. Bears are extremely rare. I even asked one of the bar guys in the hostel who lived there his whole life, and he had never seen a bear. We went back the next day to try and find my skis. It took all of my balls, and we saw the dead deer as it turned out to be, which gave credit to my story, but my friends still didn't believe me. We found what was, I think, the first ski I lost, but not the other one that I dropped in a panic. I got a big fine from the rental shop for this. I still to this day have no idea what I experienced that night, but I'm still afraid of the dark even now, and I outright refused to return as my parents looked at the resort as an option for the family ski trip back in 2013. So those encounters were terrifying, weren't they? If one of them stuck out to you, let me know which one it was down in the comments. If you have one of your own, feel free to send it to the email that I have in the description below. if you would like to donate to the channel, I have a PayPal, a Patreon, and Super Thanks here on YouTube, and as you've heard a million times. If you're new here and you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and if you'd like to, I put up another couple of videos at the end of every video that you can maybe check out one of those if you want to. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me, and thank you for watching. Have a good week.